We've heard that it's all about the systems, the production of hydrogen, integrating supply and demand, whether it be for trains, for buses, maybe planes, maybe a bit longer for that. But now it's open for questions for yourselves. So any questions?
It's all about the question of cost, hydrogen versus conventional fuels.
So it's great that people have ambition, but in reality, nobody wants to pay £30 a kilogram because there's an infrastructure to pay for in the background, which they can't warrant on a small number. So what we're starting to see now, especially with city regions, is we want hydrogen. We've got an addressable fleet, whether that be your own refuse truck fleet or bus fleet. But then let's think the wider picture. So what's the delta cost to add 700 bar refueling so we can bring vans and cars to the market? And what happens is quite quickly you can amass a large number of users, but they might be 20 companies that just need 10 vehicles, not one company that needs 100 vehicles. And when you get to that sort of scale, the infrastructure can almost look after itself because the volume's there to justify the investment in the infrastructure because the vehicles are there to use it.
So just take the buses as a case study. So with the cost of hydrogen we've got at St Helens and the sort of thing which is coming around the country, we're more or less at diesel parity because the bus is very efficient because it's an electric drive. The challenging cost is the capex of the vehicles at this stage because it's very early days in the development of technology. We're building tens at the moment. When we're doing hundreds, thousands, then we'll start to see the cost coming down, but we're at the start of that learning curve at this point.
No, I was going to take Tom's question.
You asked the question about the efficiency of the process going forward in terms of particularly electrolysis of hydrogen formation. And then you talked about the, then again, reverse electrolysis in trains of kind of moving. It's just kind of what's the limits of the efficiency that we're at the minute and where's the potential, where can we get to? We've heard a lot about innovation development in other forms of energy production. Just kind of your view on where it can get to over the next 10 or 20 years.
Do you want to take it or do you want to I can answer his question if you want me to? Okay, Tom. So a lot of this is going to come down to where you want to take the CO2 out. When we looked at the whole system, so sorry, I led one of the hydrogen bids. You're going to lose energy as you convert into hydrogen, whether it's from electricity or from gas. But if you're taking out your electricity, your CO2 there, then when you go down, you can burn hydrogen incredibly efficiently. Fuel cells, very efficient on the systems. So the energy loss is often where you take the CO2 out. And be very careful. You know, I was joking earlier, other forms of hydrogen are available, whether it's electrolysis, and we're doing it via electricity, where it's SMR, and we're doing bulk. It's a play-up of which is the right system, where you're going to take the CO2 out, and the cost of taking the CO2 out, but then also the purity that you need for your application. So there's still a lot of work to be done there, but the elements are all there. And I think that's the big message that's hopefully come across the last two sessions. A lot of this technology is there. It's stop talking about it and let's just do it. And we're into that medium scale presentation and development, and that's what all the areas are really trying to do. Do you want to add anything to that yet?
I think the other thing to say on the efficiency piece is not to worry about the efficiency too much. If we're talking about stuff at a system level, there are many other things in that about the dynamics of the system. I mean, efficiency isn't the only issue in terms of the business case. If you have excess of renewables and you want to store that as energy as hydrogen, the efficiency isn't critical because you've got an excess. And there's many other dynamics in the system. So there's many other routes to the business case. Thinking about the fleets, it's about the activation energy of the transformation from, well, I could do electric, but that means completely changing my operation, or I could have a hydrogen vehicle which just operates the same as a diesel. And for an operator, there are other things about a business case aside from the raw efficiency of the process, and it's bearing that in mind I think is helpful as well.
Any more questions, or one more?
Using renewable energy to create hydrogen, why not just use it to charge a battery, forget all hydrogen, forget fuel cells?
You wanted that?
No, charge a car direct, battery operated car. I mean, Elon Musk calls fuel cells full cells, and perhaps he got a point.
I'm sure quite a few people have got a description for him as well. I think he illustrates part of the problem as well as a huge part of the solution. We can't sit in our silos. So the train that we run in Germany is a regional train. We're not talking high-speed trains. You're going to have to use electrification. That isn't stored energy at all. You've got to directly deliver the energy to the vehicle. But where you look at, if you look at, for example, the German train, it's a two-carriage train. It's 54 metres long. It carries 160 people, and it does up to 90 miles an hour. And it does that with fuel cell drive. It's a hybrid drive, so it has a small battery to boost the collect the regenerative energy. To do that with a battery, we calculated the battery needed to weigh 33 tonnes. That's basically used up your payload, but even if we could carry the passengers as well as and fit them in, because of course the density per kilo of a battery is pretty poor as well, so it'd be big as well as heavy. Even if we could do that, it would be interesting with if you extrapolate that to a small fleet of trains of 10 trains, that's 330 tonnes of battery that need to be charged. I don't know what the infrastructure would look like for that. I'm not an expert in that particular aspect. But also then we look at the amount of natural resources that would go into making those batteries and their availability and the vulnerabilities of that supply chain. I think it has to be horses for courses. And for us in rail, heavy-duty transport does not lend itself to battery electrification. I think that's
thinking more along lines of, you know, cars, vans, buses.
Personally, I'd say, well, cars and vans, maybe. But
So let's use the right thing for the right thing. So I don't want to knock batteries in any way. For cars and vans, they're great. But you get to a point where this payload massive battery crossover starts to happen. Our estimation is around 7.5 tonnes is where the fuel cell hydrogen combination starts to make a big difference. And anything above that, you're into, I mean, Mike's the extreme there of tons of battery. So it's about the right thing. Our systems, again, in the buses are hybrid. So we're using think of the hydrogen as the energy store and the battery as the power delivery. We're trying to get the best of both technologies to get the solution that works. We get the most passengers, we get zero emissions, and optimize it so the cost comes down as well.
The other point of that is the grid. Elon Musk will sell you lots of vehicles, but then he's not really that bothered about the grid and how you're actually going to move that power. We are really, critical for us to make that grid work. We have over 1.5 million homes. We have large-scale businesses. When you actually look at the work we're doing now through a thing called Project Charge, which is for the ENA and Ofgem, to actually understand what mass electrification looks like, it again comes with a series of challenges and opportunities. It's not as clear-cut. Certainly when up till now we've been using capacity that sits within the grid system. If we now need to move to whole areas, zero-emission transport, as well as heat and power replacement, it's not without its challenges. So I think it's a really critical element to add to the list.
I'd just like to summarise by going back to the first statement I made. Hydrogen is part of the solution, not the solution. Electricity is part of the solution, not the solution. And depending on what the challenge is, you've got to find the right solution to that. And that's hopefully something coming out. I'd like to thank the speakers. We are finishing on time. Enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow.